you will talk to me about mind-altering effects in games.
Yes, sir.
I like the sound of that. Cue music. And welcome to another episode of Panda's Talking Games. I'm your host who sometimes forgets to say his name during the intro, Phil.
And I am your other host who sometimes can't get to the intro, Senda. And
woo, wait till people listen to this in non-linear podcast time. That is what we call a rodeo opening.
So anyway, tonight's topic comes to us from our forums where GM Gerrymander asked, I've read/played a lot of games where a situation comes up involving the player no longer having complete control of their character, whether through madness, Call of Cthulhu, Savage Horror, GURPS Horror, etc., possession by a benign or malevolent entity, or simple mind control. Professor X and the Jedi do not understand consent and privacy. All of these things can involve players, quote, losing control of their characters in one degree or another. Obviously, with great role players, it's easy to just pass them a note telling them what is happening and let them run with it. But what about situations where you don't know the players as well or have a player who can't play counter to their character's interests?
So, mind control.
Yeah.
Well, this is a tricky topic. But I thought it'd be good to cover because it actually shows up in what I would consider far too many games.
Yeah, a lot.
Yes. So we're going to try to address Jerry's last question about how to help people role play these effects. But we're going to take the long route to get to that and talk about why mind altering effects are so problematic. Because to be truthful, I'm not a fan.
Right. Or we're going to at least touch on some of why they're so problematic, because I don't know if we could truly jam every detail of that into a show of this length.
Not since it took us 20 minutes to do the opening.
Oh, man.
So without a doubt, I'm not a fan, and I don't think you are either, right? Like,
I'm not. I mean, both from just a problematic perspective and from a fun perspective. So,
correct. But
let's jump right into this, which means that the first thing we should do is get a definition from our definition panda.
Yeah, so let's foreshadow
some of the issues.
Let's foreshadow some of the issues by way of definition. And our first definition is the word agency. Mm-hmm. This is the amount of control that a player has over their character within the game.
Right, so this is like what narrative control the player has to define what their character does or does not, right? Like, yeah.
First problem. The next word we're going to define is consent. Uh-huh. The permission for something to happen or agreement to do something.
Yeah, I hope we are pretty clear on this topic on this show, if you've been listening to us at all. But if this is the first episode you're hearing, or if you are in any way confused on our stance on this, consent is good everywhere, all the time, for everything.
Period.
There's not a situation in which consent is a bad thing.
Correct. Which now built on the foundation of those two words, mind-altering effects. Yeah. These are effects that can come from magic, psionics, or advanced technology that cause a character to act in a way that is counter to how the player, or in this case, how the player would control the character or how the character would act on their own.
Right. So the agency of the character in these situations is often transferred to the GM, who then makes decisions for the character. And this effect can be short or long, depending on the mechanics that have made it happen. Right.
I feel like already based on the definitions you see, you can see where we're going here.
I feel like the shape of this conversation is laid out in the sand ahead of us.
Yeah. So in most games, players have nearly total agency over their characters, right? They're really only constrained by the mechanical elements of their character, that is, what's on their character sheet, and the boundaries of the narrative they're in, like basically what's happening in the game.
Yeah, so a player who doesn't have some means of flying, some power of flight, can't be like, ooh, I'm just going to fly away from this, because you can't fly. Because that's not part of what's
mechanically, it's not on your sheet.
It's not there.
Right.
Yeah. And likewise, a player that has, for example, been taken prisoner can't suddenly just say, nope, I'm just going to walk away from this situation. Or actually, your handcuffs are broken, right?
Right.
This rope had a fray in it already.
Right. Now, to be clear, there are games that have mechanisms that allow players to do that.
Right.
But most times you have to engage a mechanism
there's
of some
usually
sort.
Like a mechanic or an economy in which you're paying to have like, wow, there's a fray in this rope. That's cool. Now I'm going to work at it, and it's something I'm going to have a scene about. Not just like the GM's like, ooh, they got you and tied you up, and you're like, oh, no, they didn't.
Right. Exactly. Okay, good. We're on the same page on that. Right?
Yeah.
So inside those two broad boundaries, right, of what's on the character sheet and what's taking place in the story, the rest of what a character does is basically up to the player.
Yeah, so they get to decide where to go, who they're going to trust, who they're going to attack, if they're going to show mercy, conversations, all of that kind of stuff, emotions, right? Mm-hmm. So all of those things start to come apart when we talk about mind-altering effects, because these effects remove the player's agency and give it to the GM instead of the player, which can be really jarring, right? Mm-hmm. Has this happened to you in a game? It's definitely happened to me in a game. It happened to me pretty recently in a game.
Prismatic spray.
Right. Like, I'm just like, bleh. So suddenly the player, who has nearly total control for their character, near total agency, right, has just suddenly lost it.
Yeah. So depending on how it came about, it can be very sudden in a game, right? So like a wizard's charm spell, right? Like, you know, suddenly you come upon like some NPC, bam, they cast charm. What the hell's going on? Right? Or confusion, prismatic spray,
personal
whatever.
Experience or anything.
Exactly. Other games, it may not be sudden at all, right? So Sanity and Call of Cthulhu or something like that may be a thing that like you've known all along is going to happen. But the sudden ones can, like, you know, in a game that's not really about mind-altering effects, like all of a sudden have one pop up out of nowhere, can be very sudden.
Yeah.
Depending on when it comes about in the game, it can be really stressful, not in a good way stressful, but in a bad way stressful. Like, what if we're in the set piece encounter of the climactic battle and suddenly the GM takes control of your character, right? Like, I mean, one, let alone they just took control of your character, but two, now you don't have a character to play in the middle of the climactic battle, right?
Yeah.
That's not fun.
No.
And then depending on the outcome of what actions the GM decides, like, it may be very regrettable after the effect is done. Like, if the GM used your character to attack and then kill a fellow party member.
Right, or even if they threw you into a bunch of mayhem and now your character's dead.
Yes. Like, walk off that cliff.
Yeah, like, yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, you know, I think we can say pretty easily that in most cases, players do not like the feeling of losing agency over their character.
Somewhere out there, we're going to get a tweet that's like, actually, I love losing agency of my character.
Actually.
Yeah, never mind.
Well, actually. So it's the only part of the game that they actually have agency over, right? As opposed to the GM, who has agency over the whole rest of the world. The players just have their character. And then also, depending on what is done when they lose that agency, it can actually undo things that the player or the character or both, right, were trying to achieve in the game. And then that can actually just, I mean, honestly, that's the kind of thing that can break people's emotional investment in the game.
I mean, absolutely. Like, imagine that, like, you've been tracking down, like, big bad guy, you know, Baron Von Badass. You get him cornered, and all of a sudden, like, he, like, hits you with, like, a charm spell and makes you, like, walk out of the room while he leaves. Or makes you help him pack, right, while he leaves. Like, you would be so deflated.
Or even in simpler terms, if you are searching for some object and you can attach specific emotional significance to it. So I need this orb to save my sister. Cool. You finally find the orb. There's a confusion trap in the room. You automatically attack and you crush the orb.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, like, oh God, now what? No.
Correct. Okay. So definitely can cause some ill feelings on the player side.
Yeah. I mean, if I've been playing this character for 6 months and this has been my goal the whole time, and then you make me destroy my goal, I'm pissed.
Right.
I'm be pissed. You're like that Am I the Asshole guy who made the girl with the knee surgery climb 9 flights of stairs.
That guy was the asshole.
You can do that. It's in the rules. And also, fuck you.
All right, so we just looked at that from the GM doing that to the player. But let's talk about the other side of the coin, right? Which is when players do this to NPCs. Now, agency isn't a big problem because if you use one of these mind-altering powers on an NPC, the GM still has tons of agency in the game, right? Like they still have the rest of the world, all the other NPCs and stuff. So you're not causing an agency issue for the GM. Now, you could be causing an inconvenience because you could catch the GM off guard. Like charming the correct minion might allow them to, like the players to shortcut their way through most of the adventure, right? Like a well-placed minion or something. And that is just a prep problem, right? And then the ability to deal with that on the fly, right? Like that's not really like those aren't real problems, right? They can be an annoyance for a GM, but it's not a real problem. The real problem that we get into from the player side is that using mind control abilities on NPCs starts to bring up consent issues, right?
Yeah, it still has consent.
Right,
problems.
because when you use mind-altering abilities on an NPC, and yes, an NPC is a fictionalized character, you are violating that NPC's consent. And, if you're Obi-Wan Kenobi and you're, these are not your droids you're looking for, right? Like, that's, like, there's no absolutes on this, right? So when Obi-Wan does it in Star Wars, like, we're all like, ooh, cool power, right?
Yeah.
No problem. Like, we all look at that one and we're like, yep, he just a little mind-altering thing to let them pass. It's still a consent violation, right? Totally totally revoked the consent of this of the other character. But if we look on the other end of this continuum and we start talking about like the domination power in Vampire the Masquerade, the original one, like the V20 game, and using it to dominate NPCs so you can drink from them, like now we're in a very different discussion place, right? Like. And the thing about this is that while some people might not be squicked out about that, there are people who in their lives have had their consent violated and may have some amount of trauma surrounding that. And so you can't just be casual about PCs using mind-altering powers on NPCs because without the proper kind of setup and the things we're going to talk about for the rest of this episode, because you could be walking someone at the table into that, reliving that situation, right?
Yeah, which is gross.
Yeah, so I didn't want to just have this episode be like, well, when GMs do this to players, it's shitty. Like the truth is, when players do this to NPCs, it can also be shitty.
Yeah.
And so the things that we're going to talk about shortly are kind of the things that need to be covered no matter which way these powers get used.
Yeah. And all of this is basically to say that mind-altering effects are tricky and require a bit of extra handling for them to work well and safely in a game if you are going to use them at all. But since this is specifically about the scenario in which you might use them, we're going to talk a bit more about the two main issues for players. So I'm going to talk about consent.
And I'll talk about agency.
So for these kinds of effects to work well, the first thing that you need is to establish consent. And there's layers to that, right? The first layer is you need to be talking about it in your session 0 in a campaign or while you're introducing the game for a one-shot, or hopefully if it's something you expect to play like a big role or something in a one-shot, hopefully you set it in the description if this is a convention game, right?
Yep, absolutely. We've talked about this before, right?
Yeah, we have. Like, give people good expectations. So you need to let people know that this is an element in the game and how likely it is that it could happen.
Right. So, for instance, if we're playing Call of Cthulhu, right, sanity rules are just a part of the game, right? Like that's like right in the game. And in fact, it's not even just part of the game. It's kind of a thing about the game that people that have never played Call of Cthulhu know about.
Yeah.
So now that's very different from something like if we're playing D&D and there's like a creature with mind control powers somewhere in the dungeon, right? Those are two very different things. One is a game that has an expectation for this to happen.
Yeah.
And the other one is a game where it's reasonable that it might never happen.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. So what you're doing by doing this is giving people the chance to opt out of the game or to remove the content if it's something that's like a tiny piece of that, right? Before you get into it.
Yeah. So
Like,
again,
yeesh.
if we're going to play a D&D game, even if we're playing a D&D module and somebody's like, look, I'm really like not cool with mind control stuff. Like it really wigs me out or something. And you have to change like one encounter. No big deal.
Yeah. Just change it.
Like you can make that change even on the fly at the table, right? You could be like cool, I'm just going to put an ogre in this room, right? Whatever. Now, on the other hand, trying to take sanity out of Call of Cthulhu is like a way heavier lift, and it may just be better to go play something else, right? This may be one of those times where as a player, you just need to recognize that like if I have a lot of issues about either mind control abilities, agency, and things like that, Call of Cthulhu might not be the best game for you to play, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was actually, this is a total side story, but like Cthulhu and Friends is a pretty cool podcast. It's really well produced and stuff. I actually noped out several seasons ago when a mind-altering effect occurred where the GM took over one of the players as they hit a level of insanity that caused them to do some things that I was like, welp. And I'm out. Like I am not even playing this game, and I am no longer okay with this content. Count me out. I'm good. Haven't listened to any more of it.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing. Like, so for games where it's so ingrained into the part of the game, it's hard to ask someone like, well, can we play Call of Cthulhu, but can you remove the sanity rules? Like,
right.
You should probably just not play Call of Cthulhu, right?
Right.
Like, and there are other games that deal with these kinds of themes and avoid sanity and things like that. So you should just do that.
Yeah. So anyway, with the initial consent, the second layer is that you can build into Lines and Veils or something like it, right? Have some tools to give yourself some boundaries so that everybody can consent to the boundaries for this content. If you have any questions about that, listen to our last episode.
Yeah, so let's say that we're all okay with some level of mind control or insanity or whatever in the game, right? Like, let's just assume that we got past that part. We may very reasonably put a line in the game that is like, well, if you take over, like GM, if you take over like my character, I don't want it having sex with anyone,
right?
That like that you pick.
No mind controlled sex.
Yeah, like that's a totally
damn
valid
good line,
right?
Yeah,
right.
Please no.
Yeah, like you may have no problem if like they drop their weapon, run away, even maybe up to the point of attacking another character or something like that. But like it's okay to be like, I'm okay with some parts of this mind control, but not other parts.
All,
like it was really right. Like just consenting to mind control does not open the door. Like it does not mean that you open the door for the GM to do whatever they want.
Right.
Okay.
Which is where I noped out of
Yeah.
and Friends, which is
Absolutely.
sad. I was listening to it really religiously, and then I was like, woof, can't. Yeah, but so anyway, the third layer is sort of the third part of that safety trifecta, which is having a consent revoking tool in the game. And that most typically is an X card, but there are many options. Please use one, right? And I know, so not everybody likes X cards and not everybody likes, each of them. So use one that you like, but use one, right? Because you need to be able to revoke consent if something comes up that is not okay. So yeah, it's important. So the key thing here is that while the player may lose agency over their character, you have to still have a tool that gives the player agency at the table. And that is so unbelievably key, because there has to be a difference between me losing agency of my character and me losing agency in the game completely, right? Because that's kind of two different propositions, and one feels a lot worse than the other, right?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Anyway, it is possible that you may think, listening to us, that Lines and Veils and the X card are nerfing mind-altering powers. And let's be completely honest, they kind of are. Because in real life, this kind of mind control would be, like, horrible. I'm sorry, hella problematic is actually what I wrote in capital letters.
Yes.
So, like, we don't actually want that in real life, right? Like, that would be awful. And so the key is having boundaries and goals of using these powers not to traumatize your players or make them miserable or pissed off or hate your game, but to be able to use them to raise the stakes or tension in an encounter, right? So like, this is always true, right? Like, don't traumatize your players. But like, mind control is one way you could really do that. So like, don't.
Yeah, and to be clear, even if you as a person have never had an incident where you've ever lost consent, you know, like if you've never had like an issue like that in your life, you can still get really upset if someone takes agency of your character.
Oh, heck
like,
yeah.
I mean, you could just, from a strict, like the GM takes agency of your character and gets it killed, like you could just be legitimately pissed off.
Right. Well, there's still a consent issue there because you didn't consent to the actions that the GM took when they took 100%. Agency of your character, right? Like,
well, even if you consented, right? Like,
well, you didn't consent to your character getting killed.
Correct. So,
right?
Yeah. So it is like, you know, so we talk about this in terms of safety models, like in order to protect people who've had past incidents. But I'm just saying that in addition to that, a person who's never had a past incident can get really pissed off about this being like this ability being used the wrong way.
Yeah, frankly, this is also just about protecting your table and your game and the fact that you like these people, right? Don't you like playing with these people? Don't you want to play with them again?
Wouldn't you like them to come to your game
Wouldn't you like them to come back?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Anyway, let's talk about agency.
Right. So mind-altering effects can be more subtle than just the GM telling you what happens, right? Like the GM telling you what happens is literally the most heavy-handed way that this mechanic is exercised, right? Like, all right, well, you're charmed. The GM's going to tell you what happens to you next, right?
Yep.
It's completely heavy-handed. And maybe as a GM, you're not actually comfortable with that. Or maybe you want to be able to take some ownership of that, but also not complete ownership. Because I know as a GM, like I would not want to completely take over a character and just tell the person what happened to their character and then like, you know, them be pissed. If there was a way that we could collaborate on how to make the effect work, but not piss off the player, right? And so there are a couple ways we can do that.
Yeah, you can ask the player for input. Ooh, it's like asking for consent almost.
Well, in a way it is, right?
Yeah.
Because so rather than just dictating an action, I could say to you, like, here's what I need to happen in the game and let you as the player who knows the character the best, like figure out what to do. So for instance, let's say I'm Baron Von Badass and I've charmed you and the rest of the party busts into the room. Mm-hmm. If I'm heavy-handing this, I could just be like, cool, Senda, your character attacks the party.
Yeah, arg. Grr.
Right? And maybe you're like the tank and you just murdered somebody. Like in the first roll, you murdered, right?
There goes the wizard.
Right. So now, instead of that, right, I can still achieve this because all Baron Von Badass wants to do is get out of the room, right?
Yeah.
So when I sent you to attack your friends, it was to basically create a diversion so I could get out. So I could look at you and be like, all right, cool, Senda, listen, you're charmed. I need you to keep the rest of the party from hurting me while I run out of the room, right? So I'm saying this player to GM to player, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what I want. That's what I need. And now I can just leave it up to you.
Yeah, how
you might do that.
Yeah, which gives me so many more options, right? Like I'm still working within the boundaries that a charmed person has put on my character.
Yep.
But I can do it in so many more ways. Anyway, which is kind of like the next one, except this is a little bit, it's a different kind of boundary limitation, right? So you could also give the player a pick list.
Yeah, so like if you're thinking like in terms of like PBTA games, this is like this, something like on a 6- pick 2.
Yes.
Right? So you don't have, like, if you're not playing a PBTA game, like, you can totally make a pick list of potential actions.
Yeah.
And make them high level and vague, like interfere with another player's action. Give the person who charmed you an object. Walk away, retreat, whatever. Right? Yeah. So you could just say to the player, like, cool, you're charmed. On your turn, pick one of these. Or as the GM, I'm going to pick one of these. Like, or I'm going to pick one, you're going to pick one, whatever, right? Like, we have some, like, use some options to play with. But what it does is if I let the player pick from the pick list, I'm giving you the chance to pick what your character would most likely do, right?
Agency.
and I return some agency back to you, right? I've taken some agency because I'm like, you have to pick from this list.
Right.
But you're picking from the list. So we're sharing agency.
Yes.
Okay. The last one is not as good of an idea.
No, it's not my
But I
thing.
like things in threes.
Yeah, okay. Well, the last one is to make a random table, and I have some feels about this one.
So I have some feels about this too, right? The random table is like kind of like the pick list, but what I might do is be like, cool, listen, I don't want to have to pick a thing, and maybe I'm not sure you're going to be objective enough to pick a thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll on this table. Like either I roll or you roll, but maybe in terms of agency, I'm going to let you roll.
Yep.
You roll on the table, and we're just going to take this, like we're just going to take whatever comes up.
Yep.
Right? Because what it removes is it's like, I didn't tell you to run off the cliff, and you didn't weak sauce the suggestion that I had, right? We're just going to like this is, to me, this is a little more of an OSR kind of approach, which is like, hey, we're going to let the dice determine what happens here.
To me, what this is it's removing agency from the player, but it doesn't give it to anyone. It's just gone.
It does, right?
So,
but right. And why I say it's a suboptimal solution is that the other two are sharing agency.
Yeah, which I like.
This one takes agency away from everyone.
Yeah,
and puts it in the fate of the dice.
This is a if I'm not going to have agency, then no one is.
So
solution.
The place where I would use this, right? The place where I would use this and it would work is if I was playing like my DCC game.
Oh heck yeah, DCC is the kind of place
like
where
this random table thing would totally work in my DCC.
Yeah, because
game.
it's everything is random tables.
Well, and my players are used to like the fate of the dice.
Yeah.
Right. So like if I'm like, oh, this thing happened, you got to roll on this table. Like they would look at me and be like, cool, give me the dice.
Right.
And just play through. Right. But we have a very different mindset about how that game plays, as opposed to something like my I would not do this random table thing for my Tales from the Loop game.
Right. No. Oh gosh.
Right. No.
Right. And
I would.
It's funny because my most recent run-in with mind control abilities was a confusion spell in 5th edition, in which it was rolled on a random table every time, but like even just from a player fun mechanic standpoint, I ended up sitting out of a combat for about 45 minutes doing literally nothing.
Oh, we're going to get to that in just one second.
Oh, did I jump ahead? Sorry,
no, you're okay.
On.
You're okay,
Yeah.
but we're totally going to address that problem in just a second, because that is another problem. But let me jump real quick, because I'm going to try to be mindful of the time.
Yep.
For editing purposes. So let's just talk about, from a player perspective, what do you do if you've consented to the game?
Yeah, as a player, if you've consented to the game, you do have to try your best to play with the mechanics that the game provides, right? Like if you said yes and you're not revoking your consent, because you always can, right? You know, consent is a thing that you can take away again. You don't sign a paper and then it's okay for forever and ever, right? You have choices. Not that I have some feels about this right now or anything. Cool. Anyway, if you get a pick list or you're asked for input, then you do want to do your best to make a good pick that is going to make the game more interesting, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can't weak sauce this, right? Because this is why GMs will be like, no, I have to take over, because you're totally gonna totally weak sauce this on me. Right? And players are like, I don't want you taking over because you're too heavy-handed, right? This is that contention. Okay.
Right.
So on the other side of this, as a GM, if you're the one who takes over all the agency, don't pick the worst thing possible.
No.
Right? Show some restraint, and you'll earn your players' trust that you can use those effects for the better of the story and not screw anyone over, right? Like, don't suddenly get agency and then be like, stab yourself through the hand. Like,
right, like what? No, like now they're gonna fight you all the way.
Yeah, you're just right. So, like, make them hesitate, make them drop their weapon, make them like turn and face the wall or something. Like, it sucks, but like it's way more light-handed than like you stab yourself through the throat. I guess your character's dead.
Yeah, like
right.
No,
and I know, before people start tweeting at us, like, I know games usually have this covered in the mechanics to protect you, but sometimes they don't.
Sometimes they don't, and sometimes the GM doesn't decide to read the rules that way if we're going to talk about
enforce them.
Contentious like this, right? Because this is part of the reason it's problematic.
So, needless to say, mind-altering effects are like spices and doppelgangers. Mm-hmm. Like, a little goes a long way.
Yeah.
Players do not like their agency messed with over and over. So, you can get away, like, you can do this with a single encounter in a whole story, and that'll be good enough, right? If you have, like, room after room of mind-altering effects, like, your players will rage quit your game.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
And then the other part is, if you do alter their mind, if you can, make the effect short, right? Because otherwise you have a player, like me, with reduced or no agency who's just sitting there waiting so that they can do something again because they can't do anything with their character.
Right. So, for instance, this is the thing I don't like, right? So if you're gonna push this onto a saving throw, or some other check, right? Like, you can get out of this effect. You can get out of this effect with a successful saving throw, and the player has a bad day rolling. Like, you've screwed them, and you've absolved yourself because you're like, well, it says you have to make the roll. So the better mechanic for this is, for the first, like, 4 turns, like, make your standard roll. If you break it, you break it. If not, every subsequent turn, you get a +1 until till
you get out of it. Yeah.
Or the effect wears off or something, or the encounter ends. Like, there's ways to make that go faster, right? The point is, once you have control of once you have reduced or removed the agency of a player, they are effectively not really in the game.
Yeah, and it sucks.
And the longer they're not in the game, the more detached they're going to become from this session and possibly, worst case, future sessions. So use this power because it's scary and it ratchets up tension, but, like, transition out of it quickly, because otherwise you just got somebody sitting at a table for 45 minutes.
While everybody else does cool things.
Yeah, it sucks. It literally is this. It is like one of the 3 suckiest things that can happen in a game.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
With that,
yes,
I am going to suggest that we move to the ending of the show. And in order to get there, you're going to tell us about another show on the Misdirected Mark Network.
Yep. She's a Super Geek is an Emmy-nominated actual play RPG podcast highlighting women as GMs. Join me and Andy every other Tuesday for lots of different RPGs and guests. And oh man, I'm so excited to record our next game.
Passion
de la Pasiones.
Yes. All right. Say, Senda, where can people reach us on the internet?
Well, you can find us on Twitter at Pandas Talk Games. You can find us in the Misdirected Mark forums, or you can drop us an email, panda@misdirectedmark.com. And Phil, once they find us in one of those places, what can they do with that information?
Just like GM Gerrymander did in our forums, please leave us a topic to discuss. We do this show primarily based on topics that you want to hear about. We try not to come up with our own topics too often, so give us a topic, let us run with it. We'll do our best to answer it and entertain you at the same time. If you like what we do here on Pandas Talking Games or elsewhere on the Misdirected Mark Network, consider supporting our Patreon campaign. Go to patreon.com/MMP. Patrons get all sorts of goodies. They get access to the robust bonus outtakes from this show, this episode.
We're almost at an hour. Keep going.
You get access to the Misdirected Mark After Show, which was also super long this week. I was very chatty.
Can't blame that one on TikTok.
No, you get access to the Slack room. You can come join us on our Minecraft server. We give out the occasional goodies when we publish something, and there really is a couple things that we're like on the verge of putting out. So our patrons are going to get some goodies coming down the line. We also like to do some shout outs to our patrons. I'm going to do them really quick. Andrew Dacey, the Warden of Whiskey.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you very much. Will Doyle.
Thanks, Will.
And MT Black.
Thanks, MT.
Listen, there's another thing you can do that is part of our 2020 marketing strategy for this year. A little marketing campaign that I call, If You Listen to Us, You Will Love Us. And that is, we need your help to get other people to listen to us. Now, you can just go and tell your friends and family to go listen to us, and we would appreciate that greatly. But there's another thing you can do that helps strangers, people you don't even know, find us. And it involves stars. And it involves a little something called Apple Podcasts, right?
Yes, so you could leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or the podcatcher of your choice. Every new review we get really does actually help new people find the show. And if you leave it somewhere that's not the U.S. Apple Podcast Store, you should tell us about it so that we see it, because we really like seeing them. And there are so many places, you guys. I can't even handle it. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much to everyone who has already left us a review. They really do actually help and make us feel special.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. We really appreciate it. Say, Senda, show me how you're going to handle mind control in your next game.
Show me what you got. 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 Show me what you got.
This show is a joint production of She's a Super Geek and Misdirected Mark Productions, the media arm of Encoded Designs.
Show me what you got. 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 Show me what you got.
So, talking about kids, I downloaded the TikTok.
Oh, you actually downloaded the app?
Yeah. Well, here's the deal. My son's getting a new phone this week, and he was like, "Hey, I've asked about this before, but I would like to get TikTok because like everybody has it at school and like I don't." And now, just because everybody at school gets to do a thing is no reason to fall in for this stuff. But no. I was like, cool, I'm gonna go check out TikTok. So
like, what is it like? Yeah.
Right. So immediately my mom sends me this like message, right? Like she got like, I told her about this like a couple weeks ago or something, and she immediately like 5 minutes later sends me this link to this quote article about like like TikTok is a ground, it's like ground for pedophiles and predators and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, whoa, like. So
the internet.
Right. So yes, exactly. I'm like, so yes, it's the internet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he already has an Instagram account. So it's not like he's not already out there. Right. So.
Right. He can already post videos even.
Yeah. So I'm like, so I read this article. And then I read the sources of the article, and I'm like, this thing is like really like it's not that the few facts they have in there aren't true about like some issues that TikTok's been working on about tightening up their privacy controls and things like that. But like the article is just badly written, right? Like it's just like if you load this thing on your kid's phone, like they're gonna get kidnapped and like sold into like child slavery rings and stuff. And I was like, whoa. Like first of all, I'm not putting on a 9-year-old's phone, right? Like no. I'm putting on a 15-year-old phone. Like I assume he knows that if like somebody's like, hey dude, what are you doing?
What's your address?
Right,
yeah,
like he's not gonna.
I'm gonna come pick you up in a white van. Do you like candy?
Yeah. Now, I'm not trivializing any of this, right? But like the article I read was like clearly sensationalized, right? So I was like, okay. I read a bunch more articles. Like I just, I did my parent due diligence, right? So I did some Googling. I read a bunch of articles, combined what they were saying till I figured it out. And I was like, all right, look, there's only one way to solve, like, there's only one way to truly know what's going on here. Download TikTok.
You downloaded it. Did you also join it?
Yeah. I'm at Phil Vecchione on TikTok. I'm
not DNA Phil.
Well, I just linked it to my, I linked it through Google and it picked my name for me.
I'm shocked.
Whatever. So I was like, cool, I'm just going to start watching these, right? So I watched 40 minutes of TikToks, right?
Oh boy.
They're kind of, I mean, listen.
They're kind of fun. There's a bunch of fun ones.
There's lip sync. Bloop. So I may mess with this and try some TikTok GMing advice.
Ooh. I like it.
I may do 1 minute.
Am I going to have to join TikTok now?
I don't know.
Then
yet.
I would have direct access to my butthole, my butt, my butthole.
There's a video. There'll be a link in the show notes.
I blew up my butthole.
It's Senda's favorite TikTok video ever. My favorite ones are the that Chinese fashion designer and her assistant.
Oh, those are amazing.
Yeah, those
are her assistant. It's her sister.
Yes, but they're so stylized. I love them. Like,
I wish it weren't her sister because I really wanted them to be a
your
couple.
headcanon's a little different on that one.
My headcanon is completely different, but it's okay that they're like really adorable sisters, but
Right.
they would also be really adorable lovers. Anyway.
Yes.
Moving right along.
All right. So anyway, the TikTok is now my new thing. I do want to ask you, because we're recording later in the week.
Yeah.
What have you eaten today?
Today, I had a piece of toast, 1.5 bananas,
Yes.
and 4 pieces of bacon.
Yeah. To be clear, the B in brat is
It's
banana, not
for
bacon. Just,
I ate the bananas first. I covered all my B's. See, I had bread, bananas, and bacon.
so here's the thing. It's a Wednesday and we're recording because we didn't record on Monday
because I was dying.
because as you coined it last week, the buggies in your
In my
tum-tum,
tum-tums. Was not good.
they attempted to get out.
Oh
is what
boy.
the problem.
A lot of them succeeded.
Yes.
None of us enjoyed the experience.
We need to start the show because it's 12
Yeah,
minutes.
we do. I'm super sad already. We've done it to ourselves again. We
All right.
haven't done it to ourselves. We've done it to me. Why
Yeah.
am I saying ourselves?
Give me 1 second. I just need
you don't
to.
have to edit
I
this.
need to just. I need to fix my adjustable desk.
Well, mine's a little low. Yeah, that seems about right.
That is some dumb humor that none of you can see, but I'm making fun of Sunda's
it's so
standing desk
amazing.
by just lifting my laptop and making
know.
making mechanical
Making noises.
Yes. All right.
Which is hilarious
That's enough
because earlier
nonsense.
you're just like, oh, I got a standing desk too, and I was like, what, really? And you're just like, yeah, look, like what?
That's some dumb humor. I told you I watched like 40 minutes of TikTok videos.
Ew.
Like,
My butt, my butthole, my butt.
I can't wait till Rob snatches up that piece of audio and turns it into something. Are you ready to?
Good
are you,
heavens!
Are you ready to do this episode?
Yeah.
All right. Are you ready to make the special animal noise?
Are you saying it like that because maybe we're gonna do a different one this week?
Nope. We only do one.
But we did a seal last week, just to, you know, it was.
You missed the flipper hands in the video.
I was just talking about the seal.
The flipper hands really
They
sold
sell it.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's
okay.
come on. We got to do this. You're gonna be crying real anime tears.
Real anime tears. Because I'm a real anime girl. Bloop. And I'm a Barbie girl in okay. Meow.
Come on, Barbie. Let's go, Barbie.
I did the meow. You
I know, but it's like shaving a haircut. Like you can't start singing that song and like not finish it. I'm still singing it in my head right now.
I mean, me too, because I had to listen to it over and over again just a couple of years ago, so I know it like shockingly well again now, considering how old it is, because I did a cover of it for the, I don't know, one of the anniversary episodes of Sasuke 100.
Yes, I remember. Okay.
Oh boy.
All right, you want to try this again? Because it's now like 15 minutes.
Meow.
Bloop. Do 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 do.
Oh God.
And welcome to Panda's Talking Games. I'm your host who can do the intro in one take.
And your name is?
Damn it. Damn it. I was so proud of myself. I came up with that part. I forgot to do the other part.
Super proud of yourself, which is why it's really funny that you totally flopped it.
Damn it. All right. Well, I'm not using that line again.
Oh man.
I feel like we should start opening that up in the forums. Like am I the asshole GMing stories?
Oh man. man.
That would be awesome. Okay. Not because our listeners wouldn't have an Am I the Asshole story, but I'm sure they could tell us horror stories.
Right. We want to hear, were they the asshole?
Yeah.
Stories. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, was this GM that I played with an asshole? Because if you're listening to us, we're pretty sure you're cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Carry
All
on.
right.
Show me what you got. Holy shit, an hour. Holy shit. Holy shit. Holy shit.
Show me what you got.
We were going to make this one short because we're recording 2 days later. Do you remember that part?
Do you remember the part where you couldn't get through the opening of the show?
You knew that was going to happen, and you let me talk
all right.
for 15 minutes before then.
Let me be clear. I knew you were going to trip up on the opening of the show. I didn't expect it to be an utter and complete collapse.
Really? I feel like you should have predicted that.
I feel like I'll be honest, I thought it was going to be one or two takes.
More professional. Professional. We're still talking, and we're at 59 minutes and 40 seconds.
Well,
Please, God.
We got to go.
Get us out.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. And hang on, wait for it. And